This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the AyaNeo 1S DS. And this little guy is actually a handheld PC. And we've seen this market get pretty saturated over the years. But what's exciting is seeing some of the new form factors like this clamshell design. But what makes this one particularly special is when you open it up, you'll find two screens inside. And I'm someone who has kind of been missing the DS, the 3DS era, the dual screen gaming devices. And this kind of brings that back. But this is actually a full-fledged PC. And I wanted to review this for you guys today. I'm someone who's been collecting PC gaming handhelds. I've got, your Steam Decks, your ROG Ally X's, so on and so forth. But this one really caught my attention because of this dual screen design that allows for interesting multitasking possibilities combined with emulation possibilities, which I am a fan of. Now, I should warn you that out of the gate, this is a device that I would not recommend to most people, and it has in large part to do with its price point. This device starts at $1,300, and then it goes up significantly depending on which SKU you get, what specs you get for this device in terms of RAM and storage. That price point is just out of reach for most people, and it's just not justifiable for a device like this. Despite AyaNeo breaking new ground here with a dual screen handheld PC, it's impossible for me to recommend this device except to people who have money to burn and are extreme enthusiasts of handheld PCs and the idea of a portable DS, 3DS, and Wii U emulator that can utilize both screens. And when you consider the price points of other handheld gaming PCs and how much cheaper they are compared to this, despite some innovations here, it's still ultimately hard to justify that price point. Though I will say that AyaNeo is also working on a device that's cheaper for this. It's an Android device called AyaNeo Pocket DS, which is essentially this same form factor, but a little thinner, a little lighter, and runs on Android. So for emulation with the chipset that it comes with, it can kind of emulate up to Wii U and run those games fine. So if emulation is kind of your main reason for getting a device like this, then I would look into that device, which is a couple $100 and not, over $1,000. So before we begin, let's dive into the specs. This device is rocking a Ryzen AI9 HX370 APU, which is pretty powerful and can run AAA games at decent frame rates and can emulate games pretty much flawlessly, even the higher end devices. You've got 16 to 64 gigabytes of RAM. There are 32 gigabytes on this particular device. You can have up to 2 terabytes of storage, though this particular device has 1 terabyte. You've got 45 watt-hour battery on the inside, which I will admit is a little smaller than I would have liked on a device like this. The battery life on this device does suffer because of the power that it's drawing and the battery just not being as big as it could be. And I will dive into the battery life of this thing later on. Beyond that, you've got the displays, which are beautiful. The first display up top is a 7-inch 1080p 1920 by 1080, 144 hertz OLED screen. So you get those rich blacks, you get those really saturated colors that really pop out. It is a gorgeous screen. And then below that, you've got the second display, which is a 4.5-inch 1620 by 1080, 60 hertz LCD display. So there's a bit of a disparity between the bottom and the top screen, not so much as to distract from the gameplay experience or the multitasking elements or even emulation of consoles like DS and 3DS. But there is that disparity, and it is noticeable, especially when, you've got darker images on both. You can see that the top screen definitely has those deeper blacks, and in turn the colors just pop a bit more. But that's never been to a point where I found that disparity distracting. They're still both pretty good screens. And finally, in terms of connectivity, you've got things like Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.3, so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot going on with this device, and jam-packing all of that into a package like this does mean that this device is a little bit on the heavier side, not to the point where it's unwieldy, but as you pick it up, you can definitely feel its weight. So closing it right now, you can see that you've got this plastic chassis. You've also got this metal, and then beyond that, all the components housed inside what is a pretty compact package. What this ultimately yields is a device that is 655 grams, so around 1.44 pounds. For comparison, right here I have the Steam Deck OLED edition. The Steam Deck OLED is actually a little lighter than the AyaNeo 1SDS, coming in at 640 grams, 1.41 pounds compared to 1.44 pounds. And all of the weight on the Steam Deck is distributed sort of in a wider berth, whereas you've got the AyaNeo here, which is much more compact. I mean, just looking at the size comparison, the AyaNeo in terms of the surface area is basically just as big as the Steam Deck's screen, which is pretty wild. But all of that weight is centered in a sort of more compact region, and so the weight can be felt a little more. And then beyond that, you've got the ROG Ally X here, which is a little heavier. The ROG Ally X comes in at 678 grams, which is around 1.49 pounds, almost a pound and a half. And picking this device up, I can feel the more even distribution of the weight, whereas the AyaNeo, it just, you can feel how much the weight is kind of really centered in a more compact and a denser form factor. And then, of course, you've got the Nintendo Switch 2, which is not a PC, but it is a gaming device. You can see right here that even compared to the Nintendo Switch 2, the AyaNeo 1SDS in terms of surface area is pretty compact. The Switch 2 comes in at 534 grams or 1.18 pounds, so picking it up, it definitely feels significantly lighter than the AyaNeo 1SDS. Not by such an astronomical degree of difference that the AyaNeo is unwieldy or, it is something that you can't use as a handheld. It does feel handheld enough, but just know, you'll be carrying this around and feeling the weight. Now, of course, while the AyaNeo 1SDS takes up less space from a surface area standpoint, it is, a somewhat thicker device, especially compared to something like the Nintendo Switch 2, which is so much thinner. But this device, the AyaNeo, is not that different from something like the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally X when it comes to overall thickness, though, in terms of the thinnest point, the Steam Deck definitely is thinner at its thinnest point. But then if we bring out something like the ROG Ally X, you'll find that the thickness is actually even at the thinnest point of the ROG Ally X. It's not that different from the AyaNeo 1SDS, but the AyaNeo 1SDS takes up less space in general across the board. It is easier to slip into a bag, and because of this clamshell form factor, all the components are protected on the inside of the device. So there's just this sense of safety carrying this around because of that form factor. Though because it is still a premium device, you'll likely still want to put it in some kind of safe case. But you can just kind of pick this up, carry this around, and I mean, if you so dare, put this in your pocket. It is still relatively large and chunky for a pocket, but compared to, say, the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally X or even the Nintendo Switch 2, because it takes up so much less surface area and because the clamshell makes it more of a brick without any additional protrusions, it can technically slip in a pocket. I mean, I can actually show you right now. I've got these shorts here that are bigger pockets, but technically I can slip this device in here, and you can see that while it does stick out, it does fit in there in a way that, say, like the Steam Deck or the Switch 2 or the ROG Ally X would not be able to fit. Like this device, just, if I try to put this in my pocket, it, sticks out and the surface area is significantly greater. The AyaNeo 1SDS's form factor does allow for some pocketability and it makes it significantly more portable. So the fact that the AyaNeo 1SDS is as portable as it is and can still play PC games at pretty high frames per second and also emulate games and still house two screens that allows for multitasking and additional emulation possibilities, it makes this a pretty compelling package. Now, what does it feel like to actually use the device, to hold it and to, engage with its inputs like the analog sticks here, the buttons? I would definitely say this device is not as comfortable as the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally X, but it's by no means an uncomfortable device. It's just everything is more compact. The sticks, for example, are smaller, but there's still like a surprising amount of range of motion, as you can see right here, but they're also inset in this kind of crater, if you will, so there might be times where your thumb will make contact with the edges and these ridges, and so that takes some getting used to, but eventually it feels really seamless, and these feel really smooth to use. Now, something really neat about this analog stick is the fact that you can actually detach the tops And you've got this universal kind of slot that allows you to purchase your own custom analog sticks and insert them in here. And putting it back on is super easy. I just press and it clicks in just like that. Now, this being a clamshell device, there's only so tall you can make the analog sticks before this thing can't close. So that's one thing to watch out for. But that additional level of customizability for the two sticks, I think is really welcome. The buttons themselves are really nice and clicky. You can hear for yourself. Right here, we got the triggers, shoulder buttons, and additional sort of function buttons, if you will. It's got all of the inputs necessary to play all of the AAA games and all of the systems that you might want to emulate on this device. Now, one quirk worth highlighting with this one is that the trigger buttons here, they don't go down vertically like that. They go inward sort of diagonally like so, as you can see right here. So pressing these, it took some getting used to, and I still ultimately prefer triggers that go downwards vertically. It's definitely something you can get used to, but for me personally, I don't feel like this solution for trigger buttons is as comfortable as the ones that go down vertically because of just the way my index fingers hug the trigger buttons. It just feels like the natural motion is to hit kind of this area instead of the corners here. And when you hit this area where you normally would, there's more resistance and it makes the trigger buttons harder to press. So I would have liked for the trigger buttons to not have this diagonal motion. It does not ruin the console or the gameplay experience. You can adapt, absolutely, but it's not my personal preference if I had to pick between the two. But other than that, I mean, it's your standard inputs for a device like this. Now, given that the inputs are not diagonally placed, reaching down to the right analog stick and the D-pad, it is a little more awkward, and it does result in your hands getting cramped a little more compared to something like the ROG Ally X, where everything is kind of situated in a really comfortable place in positions where your thumb would naturally go to. They're kind of offset in a diagonal fashion, and so that makes this a far more comfortable gameplay experience. So, I would not expect the level of comfort that you'd find on that kind of device or even the Steam Deck. But given the compact nature of this device, the clamshell form factor, the two screens, and the additional elements that it offers, maybe that is a worthwhile trade-off for you if this is the kind of device that you're looking for and you like the advantages and extra features that it uniquely offers that competitors don't right now. Now, you've got some additional buttons here towards the bottom. This is select and start. Then you've got this button that takes you to desktop. This handheld PC does run on Windows, so some of these buttons are meant to make the Windows browsing experience just better, because Windows, unfortunately, it's just not meant for these kinds of handheld devices. So you've got buttons like this one that immediately take you to desktop. This button brings up the AyaNeo kind of interface, which I'll show you in a bit. This right here is a trackpad that you kind of navigate with your thumb, and it's not very sensitive. It's not well implemented. I never really use this, and I'll show that off a little bit more once I turn on the device, but it's not functional enough for me to recommend this as a form of mouse input. And then you've got the power button here that also serves as a fingerprint sensor. So as you pick up your device and you want to log in, you can just place your thumb on it and it'll read it. And Windows should log you in if you set your thumbprint properly there. You've got volume up and down. I do find the placement of this a little weird. I would have preferred these to be, I don't know, sort of on the bottom maybe or somewhere on the sides. Not the biggest deal in the world, but I just find it a little strange. And then to the left of the volume rockers, you've got this button right here that essentially serves as Xbox's home button. And then to the left of that, you've got this button right here that brings up AyaNeo's second screen interface. You click this button and essentially a menu pops up that gives you numerous functionalities that I'll get into in a second. So those are what these buttons do. There's a lot going on down here, a little too much going on in my opinion, but they get the job done. Looking around the device, you'll find various IOs like this 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. You've got the speakers that are downward facing, and then up here you've got two USB-C ports and a micro SD card slot that you can open up like so. One thing I do want to mention in terms of overall comfort of this device is that I do think that these edges are a little sharp, and so when you kind of hold this device and when it starts kind of weighing on the palm of your hands, you can feel those sharp edges right there and right there. And over time, I did find myself getting a little fatigued, especially when playing sort of more intense games like, say, Hollow Knight. I've been playing a lot of Hollow Knight on this device, especially if you kind of put in that vertical orientation where gravity is kind of pushing the console down towards the flesh of your hands. You kind of start to feel some of the fatigue and how much this device does weigh. And the compact nature of the device and the density of its weight does mean that just the weight distribution kind of really starts to dig in a little bit. It's not so uncomfortable as to make this unplayable. You can still have long hours with this device, but I would say not as much as the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally X. I mean, you can play those devices for as long as you want, and you kind of never would get those kinds of hand cramps because all of the buttons and the layout and the ergonomics are just so well established and well done, and everything is just so comfortable to use where you can do this for many, many hours. But one thing that the AyaNeo 1SDS does offer is the ability to use its clamshell design to prop up the screen like so. And so you can have like a Bluetooth controller connected to it, and you can play like this. You can use this almost as like a little mini laptop. And because this hinge is so freaking good at holding its position, I mean, you can see right here, it holds its position at just about any angle that you set it in. And so that is a really nice hinge that gives you infinite possibilities for angles in which you can place this. And so you can prop this up however you want and use an external controller and have a really comfortable experience. So if you're like, say, flying, right, and you want to just like put this device up on a tray and use a controller to play your games, whether it's emulated games or whether it's AAA games or PC games, you can do that really easily with this device. And so that level of comfort this offers that other devices don't. So there's some trade-offs when it comes to this kind of compact form factor and the addition of a second screen, but the portability of this device and just how beautiful it looks and how premium it feels in the hands, and the metal here, cold to the touch. And I mean, it is a gorgeous device overall. And there are various color options for the AyaNeo 1SDS, but I do really love this one. It is very retro influenced, as you can see right here, with the specific tone of gray. And then opening the device up, you can see that the buttons here are very much meant to be retro influence in terms of the color scheme, offering as much as it does in this kind of really small package that, I mean, when you compare it to other devices, you can really see how much smaller this device is. It's pretty incredible what they've accomplished here. It is quite the technological feat. All right, so with that out of the way, let's turn on the device. Hitting the power button, you can see the light indicating that the device is on. Now, despite this being a clamshell device, it doesn't have the kind of like sleep mode that a lot of clamshell devices do, where you can close it and open it, and the ability to access the device and its features is instantaneous. Because it is running on Windows and it's got all the quirks of Windows, which is a device that is not optimized for that kind of experience, unfortunately, it's not as seamless as other clamshells. Putting the device to sleep is as simple as just closing the lid on this device, and the device will automatically go to sleep. But then resuming activity and waking the device back up, that's where it can take quite a while because of just the way Windows works. So right here, I can open the device, but you can see it doesn't just automatically boot into Windows. I have to hit the power button again and wait for it to essentially come back alive in the way that a Windows PC would. So that's far from ideal. So it goes to the boot sequence. I just wish that experience was more akin to what clamshell devices would do, where it's a lot more frictionless between putting the device to sleep and then opening the lid and kind of waking it back up. But anyway, let's get into Windows proper. I'm going to use my thumbprint to get into the device. You can see that it recognizes my thumbprint. I don't know why this is open right here, but let's close that out for now. But yeah, you can see right here, Windows already is getting in the way of this being an optimal experience. But once we boot into the AyaNeo kind of custom interface, you've got all of your games right here. I've only installed a few, Hollow Knight, Dark Souls Remastered, Baldur's Gate 3, and Cyberpunk 2077. But from here, you can access your games library. You can kind of go through various aspects that allow you to customize your device, like the controls and the shortcuts, so on and so forth. So this is the Aya Space software experience, and you've got additional settings right here that you can go through. And then on the bottom, you can see this is where the magic of the device really comes into play. You've got that secondary screen, and this button essentially triggers that on and off. So this right here is the desktop, and then this right here is the Aya kind of specific menu for the second screen. And through here, I can also show you the functionalities of buttons like this one right here, which takes you to desktop. And then when I hit that Xbox home button right here, you can see that Xbox related stuff comes up, and then I'll hit the desktop button again to go back to desktop and show you things like the volume rocker. I can go volume up, volume down. And then I'll show you the trackpad functionality. I don't know if you can see the mouse right here, but you can see that I'm trying to utilize it, but this trackpad really sucks, for lack of better words. Now, weirdly, if I use this part of my thumb, instead of like this part of my thumb, the flesh part of my thumb, more the bony part of my thumb, then you can see right here that it works properly. It works a lot better and a lot smoother, and this becomes more usable. But then that involves extending your thumb out in a way that isn't really comfortable to use. And you've got just this very small surface area where that bony part of your thumb is. But if you try to use the flesh, you can see right here, the more fleshy part, just the sensitivity is all kinds of off, and it goes wonky, and it's just not a fun experience, this trackpad. So I wish they would have done a better job with this. I would have preferred that they excluded it if it was just going to waste space and not function properly. But anyway, let's take a look at the second screen experience in the AyaNeo 1S DS. You can see you've got a couple tabs at the bottom, all offering various functionalities. The monitor tab here essentially monitors aspects of this device's performance, the TDP, the fan speed, CPU, GPU usage, so on and so forth. And then on the performance tab here, you can actually tweak the performance of this device. So you've got various power options that you can customize. So in saving power mode, you can go all the way down to 3 TDP. And then, you can set the frame rate, which is right here set to unlimited. If I go to balance here, I've set it so that it's 15 watts. You can also set the frame rate limit. This is set to 120 FPS, but you can set it to unlimited as well. Recall that the primary display here, the 7-inch OLED screen, is a 144 hertz screen. So for stuff that can go that high in terms of frame rate, the ability to customize your FPS limit up to 120 frames per second is really nice to have. But hey, you can use the touch functionality here to drag this and set the frame rate limit to however you want. So, you can go down to 15 frames per second if for whatever reason you want to do that. But limiting things to like 30 FPS or even, like 45 FPS, really helpful for those games that don't have stable frame rate, but you can stabilize that frame rate by running it at a kind of lower frames per second limit to make everything feel a little smoother, more consistent. And then the extreme option here, I've just, maxed it out to 30 TDP and unlimited frame rate. This is for, when I want to just go balls to the wall with performance, plug this into an outlet and have a gaming experience that is just uncompromised in the performance of this device. And then scrolling further down, you have additional options like power policy, fan configuration, and the ability to set settings for CPU and GPU and whatnot. Then we have the quick assistant here that offers various shortcuts, allowing you to toggle Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You can mute, you can bring up the on-screen keyboard, you can close out games and escape button and airplane mode, screenshots, so on and so forth. Just shortcuts, essentially. Next up, we got this application menu where you can essentially add your most used apps. So right here, I've got Steam, for example, and I can hit the add button to kind of go through what I've got installed on Windows here and add additional elements to this menu. But you can see right here that in this menu, I can just tap the Steam button and it'll bring up Steam, just a single tap to bring up apps on this second screen. So it's a convenient way to have shortcuts to your favorite apps. And the next up, we got this tab right here, the Smart Dual Screen function that allows you to pick apps that are open, applications and processes that are open, and bring them down to the bottom screen. Because when you look at the setup, you can't take Steam and drag it down to the second screen because there's that gap in between that gets in the way. And so you've got this functionality that makes that a very easy process. So if I want to bring Steam down to the second screen, I just, in this Smart Dual Screen tab, I tap Steam and hit the button here, and boom, Steam now is on the bottom screen. And then at the bottom here, you can see there are options like being able to close out Steam or bring it back to the main window. And so that's how you interact between the primary screen and the secondary screen. It's through this Smart Dual Screen tab, so it's pretty important, this one. And then beyond that bottom screen, you've got the IS Space button that brings up this interface where you can also modify the performance. You can modify aspects of the device like the brightness, the volume, and you've got various toggles over here. You've got controller options for gyro, for vibration, and just various aspects that you can customize and tailor to your liking. So, this is a pretty nice interface, and the AyaNeo Space software has come a long way since I first used it with earlier AyaNeo devices. I would say it's not as refined as what Steam has got at their disposal, or maybe even what Asus has got at their disposal. But this is very much still functional and gives you access to all of the things that you'd need. So Windows functions like Task Manager, Device Manager, Control Panel, File Manager, so on and so forth. All of that can be found right here. So just a lot of great quick access stuff. And then on the left here, you can essentially freeze apps by tapping on them, and they kind of essentially pause and freeze up. I don't use this a whole lot. I just prefer to close apps or keep them open, but it's there for those who want to use that functionality. And then you can hit that button again to remove the IS Space interface, and then I can hit this button to go back to desktop. And so overall, while Windows is not the ideal handheld gaming experience, AyaNeo does try to do its best to make this, just a little more seamless, a little easier, and a little more intuitive. But Windows ultimately is just not intuitive for gaming handheld PCs. And then another shortcut option that this device offers is you can hold down the trigger and the shoulder buttons and press one of the D-pad buttons, and each D-pad is designated to a shortcut. So if I hold these two down and then hit D-pad up, that'll take me to the IS Space. If I hit left, that will take me to the multitasking. If I go down here, it'll take me to this menu, the Control-Alt-Delete. And then if I press right here, I can take a screenshot of the device. Other shortcuts worth noting are the buttons back here. So this is mapped to Escape by default. This button brings up the on-screen keyboard. But the neat thing about the secondary screen is that it renders that moot, because this secondary screen, you can see right here on the top right, you can tap on this icon, the keyboard icon there, and bring up a full-fledged keyboard that's got even all of the function buttons. It's got everything you need here to have a full-fledged keyboard that allows you to access all of Windows functionalities. And having this even just by itself and being able to have stuff going up here and having a keyboard down here that you don't have to, press a button to bring up and remove. And this keyboard right here doesn't have all of the buttons at once. So the fact that AyaNeo was considerate enough to include this functionality and make it so accessible, that alone makes this dual screen setup just really cool, really worthwhile. It really highlights the convenience of having the second screen on a device like this. But you can also very quickly remove it. You can also bring up this trackpad that you can use. It's a little wonky to use, in my opinion. You can see right here, it's not as responsive as it could be. There's a bit of a delay, and it's a little wonky. I don't use this virtual trackpad. And then this option right here allows you to set the brightness of the secondary screen, or even right here, if you hit confirm, you turn off the screen, and that allows you to save on battery. And then if you want to turn the screen back on, you hit this button right here that acts as the main button for the secondary display, and it is back where it was left off. And so this right here is really handy. And then for this monitor tab, when you boot up a game, this TDP element changes to frames per second, and you can see how your games are performing on this bottom screen while you're playing the game at the top screen. So that kind of convenience where you don't need extra apps or stuff taking up your main screen to show you the frame rate, you can have all of that relegated to the bottom screen. That also is awesome and makes the second screen really worthwhile. Now, in terms of the practical usability of the screens, right now both are set to 50%. You can see that it is very visible. Though, of course, if you put this in direct sunlight, it'll make it far less visible due to the fact that these screens are rather reflective. But as far as brightness goes, both screens can get pretty bright. both of these right now are at 50%. I can boost this up to 100, and that's what that looks like. And then going to the Aya space menu, I can take the brightness of the top screen and boost it, and that's what that looks like. You can see right here it's overblowing on the camera, so they do get pretty bright, and they look quite nice and quite colorful. Now let's go ahead and check out some gameplay on this device. I want to start with emulation. So this device runs just about every emulator for every console perfectly. But given that you've got two screens here that are touch enabled, of course, I'm going to focus on Wii U and DS, 3DS emulation. It can absolutely run all those consoles perfectly. I'll focus on Wii U since it's the more powerful, more power-hungry hardware for emulation, but just the ability to use the touchscreen and have the proper Wii U gameplay experience is just really, really nice. So let's go ahead and start the game here, and I'll show you the fact that it's really running perfectly. I'm early on here in Wind Waker. You can see the bottom screen here is fully touch enabled, so it allows you to have all the functionalities that the Wii U version of this game did. Wind Waker HD. You can see, I mean, there's not a single frame dropped. Everything is running seamlessly, perfectly. It looks gorgeous on this OLED screen. And then if I want to switch items, I can just like drag these around, and you know, I can use the touch functionality to put things wherever I want. It's just really, really freaking nice. I can, you know, save through here. Let's save the game. And using the touch functionality like this, honestly, it's almost better than the original Wii U because the two screens are actually attached, whereas the original Wii U, it was a bit of a pain in the ass to like look down and look up because the Wii U gamepad was kind of sitting close to you and the TV was further away, so it was a bit of a dissonant gameplay experience. But having them side by side like this in a single device makes this almost feel like better Wii U. Playing Wind Waker HD and other Wii U titles on this device is honestly a freaking dream. Look at this. Absolutely gorgeous. And for you to get an idea of what the speakers sound like, let me just, whoa, hey, whoa. Bro, relax. Let me just put Link here and turn up the sound. So that's the maximum volume on this device. I'll be honest, compared to the Steam Deck and especially the ROG Ally X, the AyaNeo 1S DS's speakers are nowhere near as good. They don't sound as full, they don't sound as punchy, but they do get loud enough and they get the job done. But they're, you know, far from being the best speakers I've heard on a PC handheld device. But the ROG Ally X, the speakers on that are an absolute monster. And this doesn't come close to touching that, I would say. But man, I love this experience so much. And you can touch this and look at other aspects of the touch-enabled controls and the screen that gives you so much information. You can look at the map here. And just having that access of the touchscreen and all of the functionalities and all of the information that it offers while you're playing on the main screen, it is absolutely glorious. I love this so freaking much. Now, it's worth noting that getting this set up like this dual screen setup for Wii U emulation and whatnot, it's not some seamless experience. It does require some tweaking. So, for example, the bottom screen, usually you've got that top border that shows up on all windows. So in order to get that set up, I had to use this program called this one right here, No More Border. So if I go ahead and run that, you can see right here that you can take applications and then move them to specific displays and then have them be borderless. So what you want to do is, with the gamepad view, this window right here, you want to assign that here on select applications. So right here you can see gamepad view, and it's already saved. I've already set the setting, but you want to go to the secondary display and then click make it borderless or press the make it borderless button. And that's how you get this borderless experience. Otherwise, you will have that top bar that, it's not the end of the world, but it's just a little bit intrusive. But with this application and putting this into full screen, you get that seamless Wii U experience where it's all gameplay. And it's just a really nice way to play the game. And I'd highly recommend that you use that program. So you have to do some tweaking yourself. But once you do, I mean, how freaking cool is this? Oh, this is a dream. The fact that you can have this Wii U emulator, this essentially portable Wii U that you can take on the go with both screens intact, I am so about this, especially given that games like Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD have not been ported over to the Nintendo Switch. All right, so next up, I want to show you some PC gaming on this device. This is Baldur's Gate 3, and there are a variety of games I could show you. This is the one that I want to show you today because this is, a fairly modern AAA title. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is running on ultra settings with AMD FSR turned on, and we're getting 35 to 45 frames per second on average. And obviously in indoor settings like this, you might even go higher, closer to 50 frames per second. But the ability to take a device that is this compact, that is so much smaller than, something like this when it's closed up, or, smaller than this, significantly smaller than this when it's closed up, and it can play games that look this good, that are so modern at this level of fidelity, it's pretty good. Now, I've also taken this game to kind of more visually intensive areas, and that's when you get dips into like the 35 frames per second region. But generally, we're talking about, pretty much ultra preset with AMD FSR turned on that allows you to play this game at minimum 30 frames per second. And you can see right here how useful that second screen is to track the performance of this device. And speaking of performance, you can tweak everything right here. That's at 30 watts TDP. And then beyond that, you've got the ability to bring up the keyboard mid-game. Sometimes you need to type something in. Say you need to input your character's name while you're creating your character. So you can do that on this keyboard, then disable that, and then continue the game like so. And so just having that secondary screen and having all of these features is just really, really nice. So this right here is later in the game. I'm going to load into a more graphics intensive area so you can see the frame rates here. But again, they're still staying in the 50s and 40s. And as I traverse through here, you can see that the graphics are still really beautiful. On a smaller screen like this especially, I can show you right here going into the options and getting into the graphic settings here. AMD FSR 2.2. All the way down here, you can see that the overall preset is at ultra. So it's mostly high and ultra settings. And so you can make this game run even better if you desire. I'm just showing you the maximum capabilities of this device, of actually being able to functionally play this game, Baldur's Gate 3, at very good frame rates. You can see right here, and this is a more graphics intensive area, and now it dips into the 30s.
She's a thief, hellspawn.
But still very much playable at ultra settings, and if you lower some settings, you can probably get a smooth gameplay experience overall. Technology is marvel. How far we have come is pretty insane. Now, I am starting to feel a little bit of warmth on this device as I'm running this AAA game at, 30 watts TDP. It's not hot by any means. You can just sense the warmth sort of in this area right here. Not to the point where it's hot and uncomfortable and it hurts you. You can just feel the temperature shift happen. And you can see right here the exhaust where air gets intaken, and this is where the air gets taken out at the top here. And the fan, you can hear, it's not that loud. It cannot overtake the speakers. Fans are audible, but they're not like a high-pitch hum. The kind of hum that it exudes does not detract too much, and the speakers can ultimately overpower the fan noise. And the heat dissipation is good enough, and with the plastic in the back here, it means that the heat itself doesn't become too prominent where you would hold this device, though again, some warmth can be felt. So yeah, this is just one game being used as an example. There's all kinds of AAA games that can run on this thing, and every game is optimized differently. Every game you'll have to tweak settings to make sure they can run at the frame rate that you want, but there are just a lot of options, and the bottom line is this little device, this compact, dense device, can run AAA games. It can run modern games, as you can see right here. Last-gen stuff run even better, and then generations before that, I mean, this device can eat through. I mean, Dark Souls Remastered, this game has no problem running in full force. And then you've got kind of modern games that are not graphics intensive, like Hollow Knight, for example. I can boot that game up and run that game at 120 frames per second using 15-watt TDP. So really powerful device. Now, with all that said, we do need to talk about battery life on this device, which I think is this device's biggest flaw. Aside from it being too high a price point, the longevity of this device is just not great because of that 45 watt hour battery, the fact that it's powering 2 screens, and because it's such a compact device, it couldn't fit as big a battery in here as they would have liked. We're talking about a device that at its best, the highest battery life you can get out of this if you power it down enough in terms of TDP, where it can run simple games and it can run that stuff when the device is at its lowest power. At most, you're looking at like 4.5 hours of battery for, the least demanding of games. And then on the lowest end of the battery life, if you're powering this all the way up to have 25 to 30 watt hour TDP to run the most demanding AAA games at good frame rates and good resolution and really max out the power of this device, you leave this device unplugged and you're only looking at about like 50 minutes of battery life. And then for the games that are more kind of middle of the ground where you can get away with like 10 watt TDP or 15 watt TDP, for like 10 watt TDP games, we're looking at like 2.5 hours of battery life. And for 15 watt TDP games, we're looking at like an hour and a half of battery life. So like Hollow Knight, which I like to play at 15 TDP to achieve 120 frames per second, that's roughly an hour and a half of battery life. And then it's worth highlighting that settings like screen brightness, audio volume, refresh rate, a second screen being on or off, so on and so forth, those are all factors that influence battery life. So, tweaking those aspects may increase or decrease battery life in the specific TDPs that I highlighted. And so for as awesome as this device is in its dual screen implementation and how compact it is, how small it is, how decently pocketable it is for what it is, and how, protected it is, and you can slip this into a bag and you can just take this anywhere, for all of that going for it, the battery life being as weak as it is almost defeats the purpose of its compact, dense, condensed, just kind of low profile form factor, because what's the point of being able to take this device anywhere and making it pocketable and all these things if ultimately when you take it on the go, it won't last that long when you're playing games on it. Now, if you're the kind of person who only plays like 1 to 2 hours at a time per day on the go, then this device might serve you. But if you're the type of gamer who is on a portable device and is on it for hours on end and games on it for hours on end, 4, 5, 6 hours, so on and so forth, this device just won't serve that need. The way I view this device is that it's one of those devices you kind of carry around home and you kind of put it near an outlet and you have cables there that you can hook up to this thing so you can constantly keep it powered on. And then every once in a while, maybe you have to like step out of home or be on the go and you can use this device for about an hour or two, but then like you have to find that next outlet to plug it back in and continue your gaming experience in a stationary kind of scenario where you have to keep the device charged because of how much power it draws and how the battery doesn't allow it to run for enough hours to make this feel as portable as it should be, because you're always going to be worrying about battery life. But at the same time, because this device is so small, it encourages me to carry it around more and to bring it with me and to take it to those scenarios where I can plug this device in. Like when I'm on a flight, they do have outlets there, so I can bring this with me, plug it in. I can take a USB-C cable here, plug it in, right? And then charge the device and play on it. And the fact that we have a device like this at all that is as small as this and can still run, PC games that are decently high end for an hour if you're really maximizing it, but maybe 1.5 to 2, maybe 2.5 hours on sort of the mid end. And the fact you can emulate Wii U on this thing, you can essentially have a portable Wii U on the go, is an achievement within itself. And I think it can fit the lifestyle of some people. But this device just isn't suited for the folks who don't want to worry about battery life, who genuinely want to be fully portable, fully on the go, and not have to worry about tethering this thing and connecting this thing to a power outlet. And the thing is, for $1,300, you need a device that, if it's going to be as portable and compact as this is, and if it's going to be as expensive as it is, it has to serve its purpose to the highest quality. And the battery life just not being great really hampers the ability to it's already hard to justify a device like this at $1,300, but at least if the battery life was phenomenal, then, maybe there's some form of justification. But technology just isn't there yet where you can fit a big battery in a compact device like this, where you can have long battery life in a device that is as compact as this, as admirable as this form factor is, as convenient as this form factor is to take on the go. You're just always going to be worrying about battery life. So with all said and done, I love this device. I am so happy that this kind of form factor is making a return. And when I do get to play it, and when I get to keep it plugged in, and when I get to take it on the go for like an hour or two of gameplay, this device absolutely shines, because the convenience of that second screen, the emulation possibilities, the multitasking, the data that you get here while playing the games and all these things, and then it being just such a portable device that has overall really good inputs and that let you play games on the go just so easily and seamlessly, that is commendable. But the price point of $1,300 and the battery life being just kind of pretty bad, those two factors make this device incredibly difficult to recommend for most people. But I think there are some enthusiasts who will find the appeal of a device like this, and the fact that it's so capable for something so freakishly small that also has a secondary screen. But for the rest of you, I would say wait until this form factor becomes more mature and we get devices that are less power hungry or have bigger batteries and are priced just more reasonably. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one man's take on the AyaNeo 1S DS. Overall, a really, really neat device that is just way outside the price range for most people, and where the battery life ultimately, I think, kills the intent of this device. That's my take, though. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the AyaNeo 1S DS based on the information that I shared about the device. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.